Close your eyes. The past is about to speak. When you think of the great library of Alexandria, you might imagine a serene sanctuary of the mind. You probably picture wise, bearded scholars in pristine white robes, gliding through cool marble halls, pausing to debate the nature of the cosmos with Archimedes, or to unspool a fresh papyrus scroll containing a lost play by Sophocles. It is an image of pure intellectual pursuit, a life dedicated to thought and discovery. But the reality, for most who worked there, was far less romantic. The library was an institution, an archive, a warehouse of knowledge, and you are not its chief philosopher, but one of its many cogs. For the average librarian, life was a grueling routine of cataloging, copying, and preserving, a battle against dust, humidity, and human error. Frankly, you probably wouldn't last a day. It's always wonderful to know where you're listening from, so feel free to drop your city or country and the local time in the comments below. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you are aware of is not a thought, but a feeling. It is the feeling of being stuck, a fly in amber. The air in your small room is thick, warm, and motionless. It carries the faint, stale scent of yesterday's sweat and the ghostly residue of oil from the lamp you extinguished hours ago. You are lying on a woven reed mat on the hard-packed earth floor, and a single, coarse wool blanket is twisted around your legs, its scratchy texture a familiar morning irritant. There is no gentle awakening here, no soft mattress to coax you from slumber. There is only the binary switch from the oblivion of sleep to the oppressive reality of the pre-dawn heat. You push the blanket away, the movement sluggish, your limbs heavy. Your body is damp, a fine sheen of perspiration coating your skin. This is the third year you have lived in Alexandria, and you are still not accustomed to the humidity that seeps through the very walls, making everything feel perpetually damp. You sit up, your back protesting as it straightens against the memory of the unyielding floor. Your home is a single, rented room on the second floor of a crowded tenement block in the city's Rakotes district. It is the old Egyptian quarter, and though the ruling Greeks have built their grand avenues and public squares elsewhere, this is where a junior functionary of the great library can afford to live. Your eyes adjust to the dimness. A thin slice of pale gray light forces its way through a small, high slit of a window, more of an arrow slit than a source of illumination. It offers no view, only a confirmation that the sun is beginning its ascent somewhere beyond the crowded rooftops. The walls of your room are plastered over mud brick, once painted a simple ochre but now faded and mapped with a fine network of cracks. There is no art, no decoration. Your life is contained in this small, cubic space. In one corner, a clay amphora holds your drinking water, a wooden stopper resting beside it. Next to that is a small basin for washing. Your only piece of furniture is a low wooden chest that contains your two other tunics and a few personal items. A set of worn writing styluses, a small pouch of coins, and a single, treasured scroll. A copy of a philosophical treatise you made for yourself. A reminder of the dream that brought you here. You swing your legs off the mat. The floor is cool against the soles of your feet. There is no morning ritual as you might know it. No invigorating shower, no brewing coffee. You pour a small amount of water from the amphora into the basin. The water is tepid and has a slightly mineral taste. You splash it on your face and run wet fingers through your hair, a small act of refreshment that does little to cut through the heavy warmth. You don't have the luxury of using much. Water is a commodity, delivered and paid for, not something that flows endlessly from a tap. Breakfast is a similarly Spartan affair. From a small cloth bag, you take a piece of bread. It is dark, dense barley bread from 2 days ago, and it is as hard as a wet stone. You chew it slowly, methodically. The bread is gritty, a common complaint across the city. No matter how carefully the grain is threshed and milled, a fine dust of sand from the millstones always finds its way into the flour. Locals joke that you eat a little bit of the desert with every meal, and you've often thought it's a great way to exfoliate your teeth from the inside out. There is no butter, no honey, just this dry, dense fuel washed down with a sip of your precious water. As you chew, you think of the day ahead. You are a librarian. The word itself feels grand, a title of respect and learning. But the reality is far more administrative. Historians can only piece together the daily life of a junior functionary like you from fragments of letters and administrative records. But it's clear the work was less about Socratic dialogue and more about meticulous inventory management. You are not a great thinker, not yet. You are a processor of information, a human filing cabinet. Your dream was to walk the halls of the Mausean, the shrine of the Muses, to which the library is attached, and absorb the collected wisdom of the entire known world. The reality involves a lot more dust than you had anticipated. Still, you persist. This is Alexandria, the navel of the world, founded by the great conqueror himself. A Greek jewel set in the ancient crown of Egypt. Even in your cramped, uncomfortable room, in this noisy, crowded district, you are at the center of everything. You are a part of the grandest intellectual experiment humanity has ever undertaken. This thought is the one luxury you allow yourself each morning. It is the invisible fuel that supplements the gritty bread. It is what gets you to your feet, to pull your simple, sleeveless linen tunic over your head. The fabric is coarse against your skin, a world away from the fine, pleated robes you see on the wealthier scholars and patrons. You check your small pouch of coins, tucking it securely into a fold of your tunic. You place the wooden stopper back into the mouth of the amphora, a silent prayer that the water will stay clean. The room is stifling, but you know that the moment you open the door, you will be trading this quiet, personal discomfort for the loud, chaotic, and overwhelming sensory assault of the city streets. You take one last, deep breath of the still, familiar air of your room, and then you open the door. The world changes the instant you step out of your room. The relative quiet of your personal space is shattered, replaced by a wall of sound that seems to rise from the very stones of the city. You are on an external wooden landing, a rickety balcony that runs along the second story of the tenement building, connecting your door to a set of steep, narrow stairs. The air here is no longer still. It is a moving, living thing, thick with a complex stew of smells. The dominant scent is smoke, a constant haze from countless cooking fires and bakers' ovens already at work. Beneath that is the sharp, pungent smell of unwashed humanity, the earthy aroma of livestock being driven through the narrow lanes below, and the unmistakable, acrid tang of waste that has been tossed from windows into the central gutters. It's a miasma that you breathe in, not as a series of distinct smells, but as a single, defining characteristic of the air itself. Your sandals make a soft, slapping sound on the worn wooden planks of the landing. You give a brief nod to your neighbor, a dock worker with a sun-cured face and forearms like ropes, who is emerging from his own door. No words are exchanged. Life in these blocks is too crowded for pleasantries. A shared nod of acknowledgement is the extent of your daily interaction. You descend the stairs carefully, one hand brushing against the rough, sun-baked plaster of the building's exterior. The steps are uneven, worn into shallow bowls in the center by the passage of countless feet. Reaching the ground floor, you step into the alleyway. It is barely wide enough for two people to pass comfortably. The buildings on either side lean in towards each other, their upper stories almost touching, blotting out most of the morning sky. The ground here is not paved, but is a surface of hard-packed earth, slick in places with refuse and spilled liquids. You have to watch your step, navigating around a small pile of discarded vegetable peels and the ever-present droppings from donkeys and goats. There is no concept of public sanitation as you would understand it. The city has a system of canals, yes, but here in the crowded warrens of the Rakotes district, the street is the sewer. You make your way from the narrow alley onto a slightly wider street. Here, the current of humanity is stronger. People are everywhere, a constant flow of bodies moving with purpose. Merchants are setting up their stalls, shouting to each other as they unroll awnings and display their wares. Clay pots, cheap textiles, fly-covered cuts of meat. You see a man selling water from a large goatskin bag, his call a familiar, melodic part of the morning's chorus. Children, half naked and dusty, dart between the legs of adults, their high-pitched cries a sharp counterpoint to the low rumble of conversations in a dozen different languages and dialects. Alexandria is a port city, a crossroads, and you hear the rough tongue of sailors from the islands, the soft syllables of Egyptian merchants, and the crisp, official Greek of the administration. Your daily commute is a full-body experience. You are jostled and bumped, your shoulders brushing against strangers. The heat is already building, a physical pressure that radiates up from the ground and down from the sliver of sky. You feel the sun on your head and the back of your neck, and you know that by midday it will be a punishing, relentless force. You must stay alert, not just to the uneven ground and the press of the crowd, but to the more immediate dangers. A donkey, laden with baskets of figs, pushes past you, its owner giving a perfunctory shout of warning. A chariot belonging to some wealthy official rattles down a larger cross street, forcing everyone to press themselves against the walls of the buildings. These are not the grand, ceremonial chariots of parades. They are functional, dangerous, and utterly indifferent to pedestrians. There is no concept of right of way for those on foot. Your safety is entirely your own responsibility. You pull your tunic closer. The smells shift as you move through the city. You pass a bakery, and for a moment, the rich, Warm scent of baking bread overwhelms the street's general odor. It is a tantalizing smell, a world away from the gritty loaf you gnawed on in your room. Then, you pass a tanner's workshop, and the chemical stench of curring hides makes your eyes water and your stomach churn. You try to breathe through your mouth, a small, futile gesture. The journey to the library is not just a physical one, it is a social one. As you move from the cramped, chaotic lanes of Rakotes into the grander avenues of the Bruchian, the royal quarter, the very atmosphere changes. The streets here are wider, paved with flagstones. The buildings are no longer mud brick tenements but are constructed from stone, their facades decorated with plaster and paint. The air feels cleaner, or at least the unpleasant smells are more diluted. The crowds are different too. Here you see more Greeks and Macedonians, officials of the Ptolemaic court, wealthy merchants and soldiers. Their clothing is of finer quality, their bearing more confident. You, in your simple linen tunic and worn leather sandals, feel your status shift. In Rakotes, you were one of the anonymous many. Here, you are visibly of a lower station, a worker heading to his place of employment. Historians debate the exact layout of ancient Alexandria, as so much of it lies beneath the modern city. But the division between the native Egyptian quarter and the Greek royal quarter is well documented. It was a city of two halves, a deliberate design of the Ptolemaic dynasty to maintain their cultural and political dominance. Your daily walk is a journey across this social and architectural divide. You are a bridge between these two worlds, a Greek-educated man living in an Egyptian neighborhood, working in the heart of the Greek establishment. Finally, you see it. Rising above the surrounding buildings, its white marble gleaming in the morning sun, is the complex of the Mausian. It is not just one building, but a sprawling campus of structures connected by colonnades and gardens. And at its heart, the reason for its existence is the Great Library. The sight of it never fails to stir something in you. It is a symbol of order in the chaos, of intellect in the face of brute existence. It represents the promise that brought you to this city. For a moment, you forget the gritty bread, the stinking alleyways, the oppressive heat. You are here. You have arrived. You are about to enter the greatest repository of knowledge the world has ever known. The weariness of your walk falls away, replaced by a sense of purpose as you approach the grand entrance. You approach the outer gate of the Mausian complex, a grand archway flanked by statues of the Muses, their stone faces serene and impassive. Two guards in the Ptolemaic uniform, a mix of Greek and Macedonian styles with linen cuirasses and bronze helmets, stand at attention. They are a permanent fixture, a reminder that this is not a public park, but a royal institution under the direct patronage and control of the king. They give you a cursory glance as you pass through, their eyes sweeping over you, assessing. They recognize you, not by name, but by function. You are one of the dozens of junior scribes, translators, and librarians who flow in and out of this place each day. Your simple tunic and lack of entourage mark you as staff. Once inside the gate, the sounds of the city recede, muffled by the high walls and the surprising amount of green space. You walk along a wide, gravel-paved path, lined with manicured hedges and shaded by palm trees. The air here is scented with flowers and damp earth from the irrigated gardens, a welcome respite from the city's olfactory assault. This is the shrine of the Muses proper, a campus dedicated to scholarship. To your left is the main dining hall, where the senior scholars, those with lifetime appointments and royal stipends, will later gather for their communal meals. To your right, you see the covered walkway, the peripatos, where they pace and discuss their ideas, following the tradition of Aristotle's school in Athens. You see a few of them already, small groups of older men in fine robes, their voices carrying on the still morning air, debating points of philosophy or mathematics. You feel a familiar pang of longing. That is the life you imagined. A life of pure thought, of collegial debate, of being paid simply to be brilliant. But that is a world away from your own. You are not a fellow of the Mausian. You are an employee of its most famous component, the library. While the two are intrinsically linked, their functions are distinct. The Mausian is the think tank. The library is the archive, the engine room that fuels the intellectual work. Many people, both then and now, conflate the two, imagining every librarian was a great philosopher. The reality is that for every famous scholar like Eratosthenes or Callimachus, there were scores of anonymous workers like you, performing the essential but unglamorous tasks that kept the whole enterprise running. You continue past the gardens, heading towards the larger, more imposing structure that houses the main collection of scrolls. The building itself is a masterpiece of Hellenistic architecture, a blend of Greek form and Egyptian scale. A vast colonnade of Doric columns supports a massive portico. The building is made of brilliant white marble that seems to gather and amplify the morning light. It is designed to inspire awe, to communicate the immense wealth and intellectual power of the Ptolemaic dynasty. For a moment, it works on you as it does every day. You are a part of this. But the awe evaporates as you enter, not through the grand main entrance reserved for senior scholars and distinguished visitors, but through a smaller, discreet side door. The moment you step inside, the atmosphere changes again. The bright, open air of the gardens is replaced by a cool, dim interior. The light here is filtered through high, narrow windows, designed to let in enough illumination for reading, but to keep out the direct, damaging rays of the sun. The air is cool and still, and it carries the unique scent of the library, the dry, dusty, slightly sweet smell of aging papyrus. It's a scent you know better than any other, a fragrance that clings to your clothes and your skin at the end of every day. You are now in the working heart of the library. This is not the grand reading room often depicted. This is an administrative space, a warren of smaller chambers and corridors behind the public-facing halls. The walls are not marble here, but plastered and lined with countless wooden shelves or pegni. These shelves are divided into cubbyholes, each one filled with papyrus scrolls, their identifying tags, small strips of papyrus called syllaboi, dangling from their ends. The sheer quantity is staggering, a testament to the Ptolemy's ambition to collect every book in the world. Your destination is a small, functional room that serves as your workspace. It is shared with 3 other junior librarians, but you are the first to arrive. The room contains 4 simple wooden desks and stools. There is no personal space. Your desk is just a flat surface, currently empty, waiting for the day's labor to be piled upon it. The only tools are those of the trade: jars of black and red ink, bundles of freshly cut reed pens, sponges for corrections, and a ruler for marking lines. A senior administrator, a stern man named Theon, is already at his own, larger desk in an adjacent room. He looks up as you enter, his expression neutral. He doesn't greet you, he simply points to a large pile of scrolls stacked in a corner. "From the harbor shipment yesterday," he says, his voice flat. "They need to be accessioned. Sort them by origin first." And there it is, the reality of your job. You are not going to be translating a lost poem or debating ethics. You are going to be performing inventory management. This is the first, crucial, and deeply tedious step in the library's process. Every ship that docked in Alexandria's magnificent harbor was, by royal decree, subject to inspection. Any books found on board were confiscated. Not stolen precisely. The library would have copies made and returned the copies to the owners, keeping the originals. This aggressive acquisitions policy was one of the primary ways the collection grew so vast. Historians call this the Alexandrian Book Crusade, a relentless pursuit of knowledge by any means necessary. So your first task of the day is not intellectual but physical. You walk over to the pile of scrolls. They are of all shapes and sizes, some neatly tied, others looking battered from their journey. They are dusty and smell faintly of salt and the damp hold of a ship. You bend down, your back already complaining, and pick up the first armful. The papyrus is rough and stiff under your fingers. This is not the grand hall of ideas. This is the loading dock, the mailroom of the ancient world's greatest intellectual institution. Your grand ambitions shrink to the size of this pile of dusty scrolls, and the day's real work begins. You carry the first armful of scrolls to your small wooden desk and set them down with a soft, rustling sound. The dust they release catches in a sunbeam slanting from a high window, creating a swirling galaxy of tiny particles. You can feel the fine grit on your hands and already sense it in the back of your throat. This is the dust of far-flung places, of Athens, of Rhodes, of coastal cities in Asia Minor. It is the dust of knowledge, but at this moment it is just dust, an irritant to be cleaned. Your tray is not a neat wooden box, but a growing mountain of papyrus on your desk. Theon's instruction was simple: sort them by origin first. This sounds straightforward, but it is a task fraught with complications. You cannot simply read a title page or an author's name as you might with a modern book. Many scrolls have no external markings at all. Some might have a simple syllabus, the dangling tag, but these can be frustratingly vague or, even worse, might have been attached to the wrong scroll during the chaos of confiscation at the docks. There are no barcodes to scan, no standardized cataloging system that extends beyond these walls. The system is you. Your knowledge, your judgment, your meticulous attention to detail. You pick up the first scroll. It is tightly rolled and secured with a simple linen tie. It feels solid in your hands. You carefully untie the knot, your fingers moving with a practiced economy. The linen is stiff with sea salt. You look for the Salibo's tag. There isn't one. This is common. You will have to partially unroll it to find any identifying information. This is a delicate operation, and one you will perform dozens of times today. But for now, your job is just the initial sort. You must look for clues. The style of the handwriting, the quality of the papyrus, any notes in the margins. These can all offer hints as to a scroll's origin. You set it aside, creating a pile for unidentified. You pick up the next one. This one has a tag. You hold the small strip of papyrus closer to the light. The ink is faded. You can make out the Greek letters for rhetoric and a name, Isocrates. This is a good start. Isocrates was an Athenian orator, so this scroll likely belongs in the Athens pile. You place it carefully to one side of your desk. This one small victory feels disproportionately satisfying. It is one item moved from the column of chaos to the column of order. The next scroll is a challenge. It is small and the papyrus is of a coarser, darker quality. It is also damp, a dangerous sign. Humidity is the great enemy of papyrus, causing the fibers to weaken and the ink to bleed. You handle it with extreme care. There is no tag. You know you cannot unroll it in this condition. The fragile layers would likely disintegrate. This one needs to go to the restoration workshop, a specialized department within the library where experts will painstakingly dry it out, sometimes by gently laying it in the sun, before attempting any further work. You create a new pile for restoration. Another problem categorized if not solved, and so it goes. For the next hour, you are a human sorting machine. Your world shrinks to the surface of your desk. You handle scrolls of law from Crete, poetry from Syracuse, and philosophical works that you guess are from one of the schools in Athens. You group them based on these educated guesses. Some scrolls are a mystery. You find one written not in Greek, but in Aramaic. This will have to go to the translation department, a separate wing of the library staffed with scholars who are masters of multiple languages. The Ptolemies' ambition was not just to collect Greek works, but everything. There are sections of the library dedicated to Egyptian texts, Jewish scriptures, and writings from as far away as the Indus Valley. It's a project of breathtaking scope, but from your perspective, it means another pile on your already crowded desk. Your back begins to ache from leaning over the desk. The repetitive motion of picking up a scroll, examining it, and placing it on a pile is mind-numbing. This is the boring history for sleep that no one imagines, not the thrill of discovery, but the slow, methodical grind of organization. There is no intellectual stimulation in this part of the process. It is a physical, tactile job. You can feel the different textures of papyrus, from the fine, almost smooth surface of high-quality scrolls intended for royalty, to the rough, fibrous texture of cheaper, everyday copies. You notice one of your colleagues, a young man named Lycomedes, arrive and take his seat at the desk next to yours. He gives you a silent nod and is immediately given a similar task by Theon, though his scrolls are from a different shipment. There is no camaraderie, no morning chat about last night's philosophical ponderings. The atmosphere is one of quiet, intense work. The only sounds are the soft rustle of papyrus, the occasional scrape of a stool on the stone floor, and the distant, muted murmur of the senior scholars in the gardens. The silence here is not peaceful. It is the silence of concentration, of a workplace where focus is paramount. You pause for a moment and rub your eyes, your fingertips coming away with a fine layer of dust. You look at the piles that now cover your desk. You have sorted perhaps a third of the initial heap from the corner. It feels like you have accomplished very little, and yet this work is the foundation for everything else that happens in this building. No scroll can be read, copied, or studied until it has gone through this initial, tedious process of accessioning. Callimachus, the great poet and the library's most famous cataloger, is credited with creating the Pnyx, the first comprehensive library catalog in history. But what is often forgotten is that before he could write his grand catalog, he, or someone like him, had to do this. He had to sit at a desk, surrounded by dusty, anonymous scrolls, and impose the first layer of order upon them. Theon walks past your desk, his sandals making a soft, rhythmic sound. He glances at your piles: Athens, Syracuse, unidentified, restoration, translation. He doesn't say good work, but he gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod of approval before moving on. In this environment, that nod is high praise. It is an acknowledgement that you are performing your function correctly. It is enough to dispel some of the tedium. You are a small but necessary part of this grand machine. You take a breath, the air thick with the scent of old paper, and you reach for the next scroll. The great boatload of knowledge still waits. Now that the initial, crude sorting is done, the second phase of your morning's work begins. This is a far more delicate and intellectually demanding task than simply dividing scrolls into piles based on their port of origin. You must now begin the process of identifying the specific contents of each scroll in your unidentified pile. This requires you to do something that is both routine and fraught with peril. You must unroll the papyrus. You select the first scroll from the unidentified pile. It seems sturdy enough, the papyrus a light, healthy-looking tan. You place it in the center of your desk, which you have wiped clean with a cloth. Unrolling a scroll is not a matter of simply pulling it open. Papyrus, especially when it has been tightly rolled for a long time, can become brittle. The fibers can crack, the layers can stick together, and the ink can flake off. A moment of carelessness can destroy a line of text, a word, or even a whole section, rendering a unique work incomplete forever. There are no backup copies, no digital scans. Often, the scroll in your hands is the only one of its kind in existence. The pressure is immense. You begin by gently teasing the outer edge of the scroll. Your touch is light, your fingers feel for any resistance. You are like a surgeon probing a delicate wound. The edge comes away easily. So far, so good. You slowly, carefully, begin to unfurl the scroll, using one hand to hold the main body of the roll and the other to guide the unspooling edge. You are not unrolling the entire thing. That would be cumbersome and unnecessary. You only need to unroll it far enough to find the beginning of the text, the protocolon, which is the first sheet of papyrus in the roll, and often contains information about the work. As the first few inches of clean, blank papyrus are revealed, you feel a small spark of anticipation. This is the closest your job comes to treasure hunting. What will it be? A known work, a lost play, a grocery list. You have seen them all. The mundane is far more common than the magnificent, but the possibility is always there. The scent of the dry papyrus fills your nostrils, an aroma as complex and evocative as old wine. Finally, you see the first marks of ink. The script is a neat, professional hand, the letters clear and well formed. This is a good sign. It suggests a professionally produced scroll, not a private copy. The first line of text often contains the title and author, written in a slightly larger script. You lean closer, your eyes tracing the Greek letters. On the nature of things, your breath catches. Below it, a name, Lucretius. You have heard of this work. It is a controversial philosophical poem from Rome based on the teachings of Epicurus. It is a significant find. For a moment, the tedium of your job melts away. You have just identified a valuable addition to the library's collection. You are the first person in this great institution to lay eyes on this text. The feeling of discovery is exhilarating, but it is fleeting. Your job is not to read it, not to savor the poetry or ponder its philosophical implications. Your job is to process it. You carefully roll the scroll back up, your movements precise and reverent. You take a small, fresh strip of papyrus for the Salibo's tag. On it, you dip your reed pen into the black ink and carefully write the title and author. You then tie the tag securely to the scroll, making sure the knot is firm but will not damage the papyrus. You have now given this anonymous object an identity. You have taken a piece of floating data and anchored it to the vast, growing matrix of the library's knowledge. You set the newly tagged scroll aside and pick up the next one. This one does not cooperate so easily. As you try to lift the outer edge, you feel a worrying stiffness. The papyrus is dry, almost brittle. You know that to force it would be a disaster. This is a common problem, especially with older scrolls. You must humidify it slightly. You take a small sponge, dip it in a bowl of clean water, and squeeze it out until it is barely damp. Then, with a touch as light as a feather, you gently dab the outer edge of the scroll. You are not trying to wet the papyrus, but merely to introduce a tiny amount of moisture into the fibers to make them more pliable. This is a technique that takes years to master. Too little water and nothing happens. Too much, and you risk smearing the ink and weakening the material. You wait a few moments, letting the hint of moisture do its work. You try again. This time the edge lifts. You proceed with agonizing slowness, unrolling the scroll a millimeter at a time. The papyrus makes a faint, dry crackling sound, like autumn leaves underfoot. It is the sound of fragility, of time itself being disturbed. You unroll just enough to see the first column of text. The handwriting is messy, a private scrawl full of abbreviations and corrections. This is likely a scholar's personal copy or notes. It is harder to read, but you can make out the words lectures on and the name Aristotle. This is another significant find, but of a different kind. It may not be a polished, finished work, but a direct insight into the philosopher's teachings. The pressure of this work is not just mental, but physical. You are hunched over your desk, your shoulders tense, your eyes straining in the dim light. Your fingers become sensitive to the slightest change in the texture and resistance of the papyrus. You learn to read the material itself, not just the words written on it. You can feel the difference between papyrus made in the Nile Delta and that made elsewhere. You can tell the age of a scroll by its color and flexibility. This is a craft, a form of connoisseurship that is entirely alien to the modern world of digital text and mass-produced books. Historians marvel at the sheer number of scrolls the library was said to contain. Some estimates reach 500,000, but they often overlook the human effort, the sheer manual labor and specialized skill required to maintain such a collection. Not every scroll yields a treasure. The next one you unroll turns out to be a record of grain sales from a small village in the Fayum. Important for an economist or a historian of agriculture, perhaps, but for you, it is simply another item to be labeled and filed. The next is a copy of a play you already have a dozen copies of. It must still be processed, compared to the existing versions for any variations, a task that will fall to someone else further down the line. Your job is simply the first pass. You are the gatekeeper, the one who stands at the threshold of the archive deciding what goes where. It is a position of immense, yet invisible power. Each decision you make, each label you write, will determine how this piece of knowledge is found, or not found, by scholars for centuries to come. You are drawing the first, rough map of this new territory of the mind. Having identified a scroll's author and title, you move on to the next, and perhaps most mentally taxing, stage of your work, creating the master list and deciding where each text belongs within the library's vast organizational system. This is not as simple as shelving a book in alphabetical order by author. The very concept of a library catalog is being invented here, in this building, and you are one of its architects. The system you are using is the one pioneered by the great scholar-poet Callimachus, a monumental work known as the Pinax, or tables. The Pinax was more than a simple list. It was a comprehensive, critical bibliography of all Greek literature. It organized works by genre and subject, then by author, and even included a short biography of each author and a comment on the work's authenticity. It was a revolutionary tool for navigating the sea of knowledge. However, the Pinax is a grand, finished project. Your task is to handle the new acquisitions and determine how they fit into this existing framework, or if they require a new entry. You are, in essence, writing the appendix to the world's most important book catalog. You take the scroll of Lucretius, On the Nature of Things, which you identified earlier. You now need to create its official catalog entry. You take a fresh sheet of good quality papyrus. This is not for a disposable tag, but for the permanent records. At the top, you write the author's name, Lucretius. Now you need a biographical note, but who is Lucretius? You have heard the name, but you know little about him. He is Roman, not Greek, which makes him an outsider in this Hellenocentric world of letters. You can't just leave it blank. You must consult the resources. You get up from your stool and walk over to a section of the room where reference scrolls are kept. These are not part of the main collection, but are tools for the librarians themselves. Lists of authors, geographical indexes, and chronologies. It is a library for the librarians. You search for any mention of Roman authors. The section is small. The cultural center of the world is Alexandria, and by extension, Athens. Rome is seen as a rising military and political power, but a cultural backwater. After a few minutes of searching, you find a brief entry, a note from a traveler mentioning a Roman poet writing on Epicurean philosophy. It is not much, but it is a start. You return to your desk. Under the author's name, you write what little you know. Roman poet, contemporary, follower of Epicurus. Historians still argue about the exact details of Callimachus's system, but it's generally agreed that this kind of biographical context was a key feature. It wasn't just about what was written, but who wrote it and why. Next, the title, On the Nature of Things. You write this clearly. Then comes one of the most important parts of the entry, the first line of the work. This was a crucial identifier in a world without page numbers or standardized titles. Quoting the first few words of the text, the incipit, was the ancient equivalent of a unique ID number. You carefully unroll the Lucretius scroll again to the beginning of the text and copy the opening line onto your master sheet. Now you must classify it. Is it poetry? Yes. So it goes under the grand heading of poetry. But what kind of poetry? It is a philosophical work written in verse. This is a hybrid. It doesn't fit neatly into the established categories of epic, tragic, or lyric poetry. Does it belong with the philosophical works of Epicurus in the philosophy section? Or does its form dictate its placement with other poets? There is no clear rule book for this. You have to make a judgment call. This small decision will affect how this work is discovered by future scholars. A philosopher looking for Epicurean texts might miss it if you file it under poetry. A student of poetics might be baffled by its dense philosophical arguments. You stare at the blank space on your papyrus sheet, the weight of this small decision pressing on you. This is the intellectual challenge of the job, the moment where you step beyond being a mere clerk and become a shaper of the intellectual landscape. You recall a discussion you overheard between two senior scholars about the difficulty of classifying Aristotle's works, which spanned every conceivable subject. Your problem is a miniature version of theirs. After a moment of deliberation, you decide to create a cross-reference. You will file the main entry under philosophy with a subcategory of poetic works. You then make a separate, smaller note that will be filed under poetry, directing the reader to the main entry in the philosophy section. It is a clunky solution, but it is the best you can do. There is no hyperlink to click, no digital tag to add. Your cross-reference is a physical piece of papyrus that must be filed in a completely different part of the library. It is an act of foresight and a deeply inefficient one. You spend the next hour creating similar entries for the other scrolls you've identified. The copy of Aristotle's lectures is particularly difficult. Is it authentic? A note from a student. You have to add a comment. Authenticity uncertain. Appears to be lecture notes. This scholarly caution is a hallmark of the library's approach. The librarians of Alexandria were not just collectors. They were critics, editors, and guardians of textual integrity. The process is slow and requires intense concentration. The slightest mistake, a misspelled name, A wrong classification could send a priceless work into archival oblivion for generations. Your hand cramps from writing. Your eyes burn from focusing on the tiny script. The mental fatigue is far more profound than the physical exhaustion of sorting. This is the true, boring core of the work that makes this place function. For every hour a senior scholar spends in brilliant debate, you and your colleagues spend days, weeks, and years in this silent, painstaking labor of cataloging. It is a form of devotion, a service to the muses that is humble, anonymous, and absolutely essential. Where history meets slumber, you find the quiet, repetitive tasks that underpin greatness. You are not making history, but you are organizing it, making it accessible for those who will. The grand narrative of intellectual progress is built upon a mountain of these small, meticulous, and profoundly boring acts of order. The sun, now high in the sky, has shifted its position, and the narrow beams of light entering the high windows have moved across the room. The dust motes now dance in a different column of air. A subtle shift in the quality of the light is your only clock. There are no bells or whistles to signal the midday break. The rhythm of the library is governed by the sun and the rumbling in your own stomach. You have been hunched over your desk for hours and a deep, persistent ache has settled in your lower back. Your neck is stiff and your fingertips are stained with ink. You look at your work. You have processed 5 scrolls. 5. The pile you started with this morning is smaller but far from gone. The sheer scale of the task is demoralizing. For every scroll you catalog, 10 more are being unloaded at the docks. It is a constant, unending tide of papyrus. You feel like the mythological figure Sisyphus, but instead of a boulder, you are rolling up an endless scroll. Finally, Theon, the administrator, rises from his desk and leaves the room, a silent signal that the midday pause has begun. The other junior librarians around you begin to stir, stretching their cramped limbs. The tense silence of the room dissipates, replaced by the soft sounds of people gathering their meager lunches. There is no grand dining hall for you and your colleagues. That is reserved for the esteemed senior scholars, who are likely at this very moment reclining on couches, being served a proper meal of fish, bread, and watered wine, all while engaging in stimulating conversation. Your lunch is a far cry from that collegial banquet. You reach into the small cloth bag you brought with you this morning. Inside is the other half of your breakfast, another piece of that same hard, gritty barley bread. You also have a handful of olives, wrinkled and salty, and a small, hard piece of goat cheese wrapped in a fig leaf. This is your meal. It is portable, it doesn't spoil quickly in the heat, and it is cheap. This is the standard lunch for a worker in Alexandria. You could go outside to the gardens to eat, but you prefer the cool, quiet solitude of the stacks. You take your small meal and walk away from the administrative rooms, deeper into the heart of the library. You move through a long hall lined with the familiar wooden shelves, packed tight with scrolls. The air here is even cooler and smells more intensely of old papyrus. This is the main collection, the repository of finished, catalogued works. You find an empty alcove between 2 tall shelving units, a small, dead-end space just wide enough for one person. It is your preferred spot, a little pocket of anonymity within this vast institution. You sit down on the stone floor, your back against the wooden shelves. The silence here is profound. It is the silence of 10,000 sleeping voices, of stories and poems and histories waiting to be awoken. You can feel the physical presence of all this knowledge surrounding you, a weight in the air. You unwrap your cheese. The scent is sharp and goaty. You break off a piece of the hard bread and chew it slowly. Remember that gritty bread from this morning. It hasn't gotten any softer. Each bite is a chore, a conscious effort of mastication. You alternate bites of bread with the salty, oily olives. The combination of flavors is strong, simple, and unchanging. This is the taste of your life here. There are no Yelp reviews for this questionable meal, no food delivery app to summon a more appealing option. Your diet is determined by your wages and the practicalities of life without refrigeration. This reliance on preserved foods like salted olives and hard cheese is a daily reality. The weird historical food you're eating isn't a novelty, it's sustenance. As you eat, you lean your head back against the shelves. Through the wood, you can almost feel the dense, concentric weight of the scrolls stacked inside. You are leaning against a section of Homeric poetry. You know this because you helped catalog it 6 months ago. You can visualize the syllaboi tags hanging from the ends of the scrolls. Iliad, Book 1. Iliad, Book 2. Each book a separate scroll. A complete set of the Iliad would be 24 scrolls, a bulky and expensive collection. You are literally resting against the foundational text of your entire culture. The moment brings a strange mix of feelings. On the one hand, there is the profound irony of your situation. You are surrounded by the greatest masterpieces of the human mind, a treasure trove of literature and philosophy, and you are eating stale bread and goat cheese on the floor like a servant. On the other hand, there is a deep, quiet satisfaction. You are not just a servant, you are a guardian. Your boring, painstaking work is what allows this collection to exist and to be used. Without you, this alcove would be a meaningless pile of decaying papyrus. You finish your meal and wrap the remaining piece of cheese back in its leaf. You have no water with you. You will get a drink from the communal basin back in the workroom. For a few more minutes, you simply sit in the silence. You let the coolness of the stone floor seep into you. This is your only real break in the day, a moment to be still and quiet, to let your mind go blank after hours of intense focus. The life of a librarian here is not one of constant intellectual excitement. It is a routine, a cycle of repetitive tasks, punctuated by these small, stolen moments of peace. You don't feel rested or refreshed, merely paused. The great machine of the library has temporarily stopped for you, but you know that in a few minutes you will have to stand up, brush the crumbs from your tunic, and go back to your desk. The tide of papyrus waits for no one. So before this great story continues, please take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you're enjoying our journey together. Your support means the world. You rise from the floor of the alcove, your joints protesting the movement. The brief respite is over. As you walk back towards the administrative rooms, you pass other junior librarians and scribes, also returning from their solitary meals. A few nod, but no one speaks. The collegial atmosphere of the senior scholars' dining hall is a world away. Here, the work is individual, the focus internal. Returning to your desk, you find the room exactly as you left it. The half-finished pile of scrolls, the ink pots, the reed pens, all waiting patiently. You take a long drink of water from the clay jug in the corner, the lukewarm liquid doing little to refresh you, but it's enough to wash away the last of the salty taste of the olives. You sit back down on your hard wooden stool, the familiar ache in your back returning almost immediately. The afternoon stretches before you, a long, quiet expanse of continued labor. The desk next to yours is occupied by Lycomeds. He returned to his desk a few minutes before you and is already engrossed in his work. Lycomeds is about your age, and he started at the library a few months after you did. In a different world, you might be friends. You are both educated, both far from your native homes, both engaged in the same peculiar line of work. But here, in the quiet, pressurized environment of the library, friendship is a luxury that doesn't seem to flourish. Instead, there is a silent, unspoken current of rivalry. This rivalry is not born of malice or personal dislike. You have barely exchanged more than 100 words with him. It is a rivalry born of ambition and proximity. There are a limited number of senior positions in the library. Promotions are rare and highly coveted. Every junior librarian dreams of one day becoming a full-fledged scholar, a fellow of the Mousean, with a lifetime stipend and the freedom to pursue their own research. To achieve that, you must distinguish yourself. You must be faster, more accurate, and more knowledgeable than the person sitting next to you. And so, the quiet of the afternoon is not peaceful. It is charged with a low-grade, constant competition. You are acutely aware of Lycomeds' presence. You can hear the soft scratch of his reed pen on papyrus, a sound that seems to measure his progress against your own. When he rises to consult a reference scroll, you feel a prickle of anxiety. Has he encountered a particularly difficult text? Is he demonstrating a piece of obscure knowledge that you lack? When he successfully identifies a scroll and neatly writes out its syllabus tag, you feel a subtle pressure to work faster, to complete your own current task with equal efficiency. There is no thermostat to argue over, but you find yourselves engaged in a silent war over resources. There is a particularly fine batch of reed pens, cut from reeds grown in a specific part of the Nile Delta, that everyone prefers. When a new bundle is brought in, you both subtly try to claim the best ones before the other can. When the ink in the pot runs low, there is a moment of silent negotiation over who must undertake the tedious task of mixing a new batch from soot and gum arabic. These are the petty battlegrounds of your professional lives. Today, the rivalry manifests in the form of a particularly tricky scroll on your desk. It is written in a dense, scholarly script with many unfamiliar technical terms. You suspect it is a treatise on advanced geometry, a subject in which you are not an expert. You have been struggling to identify the author, who seems to have used a pseudonym. You are stuck. Meanwhile, you can hear Lycomeds next to you, working at a steady, uninterrupted pace. You imagine he has a pile of straightforward historical narratives, easy to catalog. The injustice of it grates on you. The competition is not just about output, it is about scholarly acumen. Occasionally, a senior scholar will enter the room with a query, perhaps looking for all known copies of a particular poem to collate a definitive edition. He will pose the question to the room at large. In these moments, the silent tension becomes palpable. Everyone stops what they are doing. This is an opportunity. If you can answer quickly and accurately, citing the correct shelf location from memory, you will be noticed. You will have demonstrated your value beyond that of a mere clerk. You will have shown that you are not just processing the knowledge, but absorbing it. You and Lycomedes both spend your evenings not resting, but studying. You memorize sections of the Pnyx, you read obscure texts, and you try to anticipate the needs of the senior scholars. It is an extension of your work, an unpaid and exhausting effort to get ahead. It's a quiet arms race of the mind, waged in the flickering lamplight of your tiny, stuffy apartments. The pressure to perform, to compete, is a constant drain on your mental energy. It turns potential colleagues into rivals and transforms the pursuit of knowledge into a career ladder. You wonder if the great minds whose works you catalog ever felt such petty pressures. Did Aristotle feel a pang of professional jealousy towards Plato? Historians acknowledge that the scholarly world of ancient Greece was rife with rivalries and intellectual disagreements, but seen from your lowly position, it feels less like a grand debate of ideas and more like a desperate scramble for recognition. You glance over at Lycomedes. He is hunched over his work, his brow furrowed in concentration. For a moment, you see not a rival, but a mirror image of yourself. Another young man, far from home, sacrificing his youth and comfort for a dream. He is just as tired, just as sore, just as trapped in this relentless cycle of work. The feeling of competition softens, replaced by a shared sense of weary resignation. But the feeling is fleeting. Theon, the administrator, walks by and you both instinctively straighten up, focus more intently on your papyrus, and let the quiet, invisible contest resume. The silence of the afternoon wears on, heavy with unspoken ambition. As the afternoon deepens, your tasks shift. The initial work of accessioning and cataloging the new arrivals is largely complete for the day. Now, you are assigned a different, and in many ways more grueling, duty: scription. You have become a human photocopier. Your job is to create a duplicate of an existing scroll. The library's mission was not just to collect knowledge, but to preserve and disseminate it. This meant making copies, lots of copies. Sometimes copies were made to be sent to other libraries, like the one at Pergamum, before a bitter rivalry led to an embargo on papyrus exports. Sometimes they were made for wealthy patrons who commissioned them, but most often copies were made as a form of backup. Papyrus is a fragile medium. A fire, a flood, or simple decay could wipe out a unique text forever. Creating a second or third copy, stored in a separate warehouse, was the only form of insurance. Today, your assignment is a section of Thucydides's History of the Peloponnesian War. The scroll you are to copy is old, the papyrus yellowed and delicate. It is a master copy, one of the library's treasures, and you are terrified of damaging it. You are set up at a different kind of desk, one with a sloping surface designed for writing. To your left is the original scroll, carefully unrolled a few columns at a time. To your right is a blank, fresh roll of high-quality papyrus. The work is agonizingly slow. You must replicate the original text with perfect accuracy. Every letter, every space, every punctuation mark, which are used sparingly and inconsistently, must be identical. This is not a task that allows for creativity or interpretation. It demands absolute fidelity. Your mind must become a transparent medium between the source text and the new copy. You dip your reed pen into the pot of black ink. The ink is made from soot, water, and gum arabic. It has to be the right consistency. Too thick, and it will blob on the page. Too thin, and it will bleed into the porous fibers of the papyrus, making the letters fuzzy and illegible. You spend a few moments testing the ink on a scrap piece of papyrus until you are satisfied. Then you begin. You read a short phrase from the original scroll, commit it to your short-term memory, then turn your head and carefully write it onto the blank papyrus. Your posture is hunched, your eyes constantly shifting back and forth between the two scrolls. The strain on your eyes is immense. The dim light of the room, so beneficial for preserving the scrolls, is a curse for the scribes who must copy them. After just an hour, your body begins to protest. A sharp pain develops between your shoulder blades. Your writing hand starts to cramp, your fingers locked in a tight grip around the reed pen. Your eyes burn, and you have to pause frequently to blink the dryness away. This is the physical reality behind the magnificent collection of the library. It was built on the strained eyes and aching backs of countless scribes like you. There is no ergonomic chair, no wrist support, no adjustable lighting. There is only the endless, repetitive motion of read, turn, write, read, turn, write. The mental fatigue is just as severe. The work requires a state of deep, unwavering concentration. You cannot let your mind wander. If you skip a line or even a single word, you could render the entire copy useless. A moment's distraction could corrupt a historical record or a philosophical argument. The pressure is immense. You are not reading Thucydides for his brilliant analysis of politics and war. You are not absorbing the lessons of history. You are merely processing a string of symbols. The meaning of the words becomes secondary to their form. The text dissolves into a series of abstract shapes that you must reproduce. It's a profoundly alienating way to engage with a great work of literature. You have to create uniform columns of text, just like in the original. You use a lead disc and a ruler to lightly score vertical lines on the blank papyrus, guidelines for your margins. You must also ensure that the number of lines per column is consistent. It is a painstaking process of measurement and precision. Every few minutes, you have to dip your pen in the ink, making sure not to drip any on your work. A single black spot on the clean papyrus feels like a monumental failure. If you make a mistake in the writing, you can sometimes carefully scrape it off with a stone or a knife once the ink is dry, or wash it away with a sponge if it's fresh. But this always leaves a mark, a slight thinning of the papyrus that is a permanent testament to your error. You see older scribes in the room, men who have been doing this for decades. You can see the toll the work has taken on them. Their backs are permanently stooped. They hold their heads at an angle, a habit born from years of looking back and forth. Many of them suffer from poor eyesight, their world blurred beyond the distance of a few feet. You look at them and see your own future, a slow physical decay in the service of knowledge. It is a sobering thought. This tedious work does have a strange, meditative quality. If you can push through the pain and the boredom, your mind can enter a state of pure flow. The outside world disappears. There is only the text, your hand, and the steady, rhythmic scratching of the pen. It's a state that's oddly similar to the deep, dreamless part of a good night's sleep. Let the past sing you to sleep, but the song is a monotonous chant of ancient Greek words. After what feels like an eternity, you complete a single column of text. You pause, leaning back to stretch your aching spine. You look at your work. The column of fresh black ink on the clean, pale papyrus is beautiful. It is a perfect mirror of the original. There is a deep artisan's pride in this. You have not created anything new, but you have perfectly preserved something old. You have given a fragile voice another chance to speak to the future. It is a small, anonymous act of immortality, but the pride is fleeting. You look at the original scroll. There are dozens more columns to go. You dip your pen in the ink, take a deep breath, and begin the next line. The agony of scription is far from over. Your deep, trance-like focus on the geometric precision of Thucydides' script is suddenly broken. A presence is standing beside your desk. You look up, blinking to readjust your vision from the close-up world of ink and papyrus. It is one of the library's most important patrons, a man named Apollodorus. He is a vastly wealthy merchant who has funded an entire wing of the library dedicated to geographical texts. He is dressed in a tunic of the finest linen, dyed a brilliant and expensive purple, its edges embroidered with gold thread. His sandals are made of soft, red leather, and he wears several heavy gold rings on his fingers. His scent, a cloud of expensive imported perfume, is an overwhelming intrusion in the dusty, papyrus-scented air of your workspace. He is accompanied by one of the senior scholars, a man named Credo, who acts as his personal liaison to the library's collection. Credo has a strained look on his face, one you have come to recognize. It is the look of a brilliant academic forced to play the role of customer service representative. You instinctively start to rise out of respect, but Apollodorus waves a bejeweled hand, indicating you should remain seated. No, no, stay at your work, boy, he says, his voice accustomed to command. He barely glances at the meticulous copy of Thucydides you are laboring over. To him, you are just part of the furniture. Credo here seems unable to locate a particular scroll for me, Apollodorus continues, gesturing impatiently. I thought perhaps one of you lot, who are down here in the trenches, as it were, might have seen it. Credo steps forward, his expression apologetic. As I was explaining, sir, the request is somewhat broad. If we could narrow down the author or the specific title. Nonsense, Apollodorus interrupts. It's a simple request. I want to see that scroll about birds. The one with the lovely drawings. You stare at him. Credo closes his eyes for a brief second. The request is not simple. It is an administrative nightmare. The scroll about birds. In the largest repository of knowledge in the entire world, a collection that contains tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of scrolls. This is the information you are given. It is the ancient world's equivalent of walking into a modern bookstore and asking for that blue book I saw last month. Credo, ever the diplomat tries again. Sir, there are many works that mention birds. Aristotle's History of Animals has a significant section on ornithology. There are several poetic works that feature birds, such as the famous comedy by Aristophanes. Perhaps you mean that one. No, no, it wasn't a play, Apollodorus says, waving his hand dismissively. It was a scientific work, or maybe philosophical. It had drawings, beautiful ones. A hoopoe, I remember, and a very detailed rendering of a falcon's wing. This is your world now. The meticulous, ordered system of the pinnaces, the careful cataloging, the cross-referencing. All of it is useless in the face of a vague, memory-based request from a powerful man who cannot be denied. This is a common occurrence. The library's patrons are its lifeblood, but they are often its greatest frustration. They treat the institution less like a research center and more like a personal collection to be browsed at whim. There is no online search engine, no keyword function. The search engine is you, your memory, your knowledge of the collection's eccentricities. Theon, the administrator, has noticed the important visitor and glides over. He looks at you, at Lycomedes, and at the two other scribes in the room. His expression is clear. One of you had better solve this. The silent rivalry between you and Lycomedes instantly sharpens. This is a prime opportunity to impress, to demonstrate a mastery of the stacks that goes beyond simple clerical work. You rack your brain. A scroll about birds with illustrations. Aristotle is the obvious choice, but Apollodorus rejected it. The mention of drawings is a key clue. Illustrated scrolls were rare and expensive. The ink for colors had to be made from costly ground minerals, and the artists who could render detailed images were specialists. Such a scroll would be a prized possession, likely kept in a special section. You can see Lycomedes next to you, his face a mask of concentration. He is clearly running through his own mental index of the collection. You think back over the thousands of scrolls you have handled, sorted, and shelved. You remember a recent acquisition, part of a collection purchased from a traveling scholar from Pergamum. It was a set of zoological notebooks. You had only glanced at it, but you remember being struck by the quality of the papyrus and the unusual detail on the syllabus tag, which mentioned illustrated plates. It's a long shot, a gamble, but standing up and saying, "I don't know," is not an option. You clear your throat, it comes out as a dry rasp. "Sir," you begin, your voice uncertain. All eyes turn to you. There was a collection of observational notes acquired several months ago, from a physician named Nicander. I believe it contained detailed anatomical drawings of various animals, including birds. It is not a formal treatise, more of a personal notebook, so it would not be filed under Aristotle. Credo's eyes light up with a flicker of hope. Nicander of Colophon. Yes, I know his work. He wrote didactic poems on venomous animals and their remedies. This seemed to be a different work, you say, gaining confidence. It was shelved in the new acquisitions section for medical and biological texts, under N. Apollodorus looks at you, a flicker of interest in his eyes. He is no longer looking through you, but at you. Drawings, you say, good ones. I only saw the scroll briefly, sir, but I recall the illustrations were of very high quality, you reply, praying that your memory is correct. Well then, what are we waiting for? Apollodorus booms. Let's have a look at it. Credo gives you a look of profound gratitude. Theon gives you a curt, approving nod that feels like a coronation. You have done it. You have succeeded where a senior scholar had failed. You have navigated the impossible patron request. As Credo leads the wealthy merchant away towards the medical section, you feel a surge of triumph. You glance at Lycomedes. He is staring down at his desk, his shoulders slumped in defeat. In the silent, ongoing competition, you have just scored a decisive victory, but the triumph is mixed with a deep weariness. You have solved the problem, but now you must return to your own work. You look down at the half-finished column of Thucydides. The thrill of the intellectual puzzle is over, and the long, monotonous labor of the scribe awaits you once more. Your small victory over the impossible patron request provides a temporary boost to your morale, but the feeling quickly fades as you return to the reality of the afternoon's work. The encounter, while successful, has served as a stark reminder of the library's fundamental vulnerability. It is not just subject to the whims of its patrons, but to a host of more insidious and persistent enemies: dust, insects, and humidity. Your next task is to engage in the constant, and ultimately losing, battle against decay. Theon assigns you to a section of the library that hasn't been inspected in some time. It is a dim, quiet corner holding lyric poetry. Your job is to perform a shelf check, a physical audit of the scroll's condition. You are given a soft brush made of camel hair and a small, damp cloth. These are your weapons. You arrive in the designated aisle. The air here is still and heavy, thick with the smell of aging organic material. The silence is absolute. This section is rarely visited. Lyric poetry is not as popular with scholars as philosophy or history. You pull a small wooden ladder over to the first shelving unit and climb up to the highest cubbyhole. You reach in and carefully pull out the first scroll. The moment you touch it, you know there is a problem. The papyrus feels strangely light and brittle, and a fine shower of reddish-brown dust falls from it onto your hand. You bring the scroll closer to the faint light. The outer layers are riddled with tiny holes, and as you gently turn it, you see the culprits. A swarm of tiny insects, no bigger than a grain of sand, scurrying away from the light. They are bookworms, a term that for you is not a metaphor for a dedicated reader, but a literal description of a destructive pest. A wave of dismay washes over you. This scroll, a collection of poems by Sappho, is severely damaged. The worms have chewed through the layers of papyrus, turning the precious words into a delicate, fragile lattice. The text is likely lost. There is no way to repair this kind of damage. You can try to stop the infestation from spreading, but you cannot restore what has been eaten away. Historians speculate that vast swaths of ancient literature were not lost in grand, dramatic fires, but were silently consumed in quiet, dark corners like this, one tiny bite at a time. You carefully place the infested scroll in a separate basket designated for damaged items. It will be taken to be fumigated with sulfur, a desperate attempt to kill the insects, but the scroll itself is almost certainly a total loss. Unless a copy exists elsewhere in the library's backup storage, these specific poems by this specific author may have just vanished from the world forever. You, the humble librarian, are the one to witness this quiet extinction event. You continue your inspection, moving from scroll to scroll. You are now hypervigilant, your eyes scanning for any sign of infestation. You use your soft brush to gently whisk away the accumulated dust from each scroll. The dust is not just unsightly. It is an abrasive that can damage the papyrus fibers over time, and it also provides a home for insect eggs. The work is repetitive and dirty. The fine dust gets into your eyes, your nose, and your mouth. You feel it coating your skin and settling in your hair. Your second enemy is humidity. Although Alexandria does not have a heavy rainfall, its proximity to the sea means the air is perpetually moist. This is a disaster for papyrus. You find a scroll that feels strangely soft and limp. As you handle it, you see the dark, spreading stains of mildew. The mold has begun to grow on the papyrus, feeding on the starches in the material. The ink on the affected areas has bled, blurring the letters into an illegible mess. Even worse, the dampness has caused the tightly rolled layers of the scroll to stick together into a solid, inseparable mass. Attempting to unroll it would simply tear it to shreds. This scroll, too, must be condemned. It will be taken to the restoration workshop, where they may try to slowly dry it and separate the layers, but the chances of success are slim. It is another casualty in this unending war. You are not just a librarian, you are a conservationist, a custodian fighting a battle against the fundamental laws of entropy. The library is a monument to permanence, but it is built from the most impermanent of materials. The sheer effort required to maintain this collection is staggering. There is no climate control, no hermetically sealed vaults. Your tools are simple and rudimentary: brushes, cloths, and vigilance. You think of the grand narrative of the library, the collection of all the world's knowledge. But the unwritten story is the one you are living, the story of the constant, grueling, and often futile effort to keep that knowledge from turning back into dust and mold. As you work your way down the shelves, you find scrolls in good condition, and for each one, you feel a small sense of relief. You gently dust it, check its tag, and place it back in its cubbyhole with care. But the successes feel small compared to the failures. The losses are absolute. The irony is not lost on you. In the grand halls nearby, scholars are debating eternal truths and the immortal nature of the soul. Here, in the dusty stacks, you are confronted daily with the brute reality of decay and impermanence. Everything falls apart. Every text, no matter how profound, is one insect infestation, one damp summer, away from oblivion. You finish the first shelving unit and move on to the next, the basket of damaged scrolls a depressing testament to your morning's work. The task feels hopeless. For every scroll you save, another is quietly being consumed somewhere else in this vast, sprawling building. You are not a noble guardian of wisdom. You are a dike keeper, plugging leaks in a dam that is destined to burst. Your respect for the people who built and maintained this place deepens. It was not just an act of intellectual ambition, but an act of profound, perhaps foolish, defiance against the decaying hand of time itself. They knew the odds were against them, but they fought the battle anyway, with soft brushes and watchful eyes, in the quiet, dusty corners of the world's greatest library. As the afternoon light begins to fade, a new rhythm takes hold in the library. The quality of the light changes from the harsh white of midday to a softer, warmer gold. This is the signal that the workday is drawing to a close. But your duties are not yet over. In some ways, the most critical part of the day is about to begin, securing the scrolls for the night. The setting of the sun brings with it a different set of dangers. The cool evening air can cause moisture to condense on the scrolls. The darkness provides cover for pests like mice and rats, which can sneak into the building and cause catastrophic damage in a matter of hours. And most terrifyingly, there is the ever-present risk of fire. The library is a tinderbox, a building made of wood and paper. An overturned oil lamp could reduce the collected knowledge of the world to a pile of ash. Because of this, open flames are strictly forbidden within the main library building after dusk. All work must cease once the natural light is gone. Your final task of the day is to go through your designated section and ensure every scroll is properly stored. This is not simply a matter of tidying up. It is a meticulous ritual of preservation. You start with your own desk, the precious Thucydides scroll you were copying, and your own incomplete copy must be carefully rolled up and secured. You place them in a special locked wooden chest reserved for works in progress. You clean your reed pens, wiping away the excess ink, and place them in their holder. You stopper the ink pot tightly. Nothing is left out. An open ink pot could be tipped over, ruining a desktop and whatever is on it. Once your personal workspace is clear, you begin your rounds. You walk through the same aisles you were inspecting for insects earlier. Your focus is now on security. You check the wooden shutters on the high windows, making sure they are closed and barred. This is not just for security against thieves, though that is a concern, but to keep out the damp night air and any nocturnal creatures. You move along the shelves, your eyes scanning the cubby holes, the loculi. Every scroll must be nestled deep within its compartment, not left protruding where it could be accidentally knocked to the floor or be more exposed to the elements. You check that the syllaboi tags are all present and accounted for, not tangled or torn. In some sections of the library, where particularly valuable or fragile scrolls are kept, there are cabinets with wooden doors. Your duty is to close and lock each one of these. You carry a heavy iron key, a symbol of your responsibility. The sound of the key turning in the lock is a satisfyingly solid noise, a sound of finality and security. Each locked cabinet is a small victory against the chaos of the night. This process is repeated by every junior librarian in their assigned section. It is a slow, methodical sweep of the entire building. The senior scholars have long since departed, either to their own homes or to the dining hall for their evening meal and conversation. The work of locking down the library is left to the junior staff, the silent guardians who open the building in the morning and secure it at night. As you move through the deepening twilight of the halls, the library takes on a different character. It feels less like a workplace and more like a temple or a tomb. The rows upon rows of silent scrolls seem to hold their breath in the dimming light. The weight of the knowledge they contain feels heavier, more profound. You are walking through a sleeping city of the mind. You feel a sense of reverence that is often lost during the mundane bustle of the day. You see Lycomedes at the far end of a long corridor, also performing his closing duties. In the dim, shared light, the sharp edges of your rivalry seem to soften. You are no longer competitors, but two members of the same night watch, two priests performing the same evening rites. He gives you a slight nod, and you return it. It is a moment of shared purpose that transcends your daily competition. Your final checkpoint is a large, cedar-lined room where some of the most valuable scrolls are stored. Cedarwood is known to be a natural insect repellent, and these scrolls, unique copies of the great Athenian playwrights, are given this extra layer of protection. You swing the heavy wooden door closed. It has a large bronze lock. You fit your iron key and turn it. The bolt slides home with a heavy, reassuring sound. This room is now a vault, a fortress protecting Sophocles and Euripides from the ravages of the night. Once your section is secure, you report back to Theon, who is standing near the side exit, cross-referencing a checklist on a wax tablet. He makes a mark next to your name, signifying your duties are complete. There is no thank you or good work. The correct performance of your duty is simply expected. You join the small group of other junior librarians waiting to be dismissed. You are all tired. The day has been long and filled with 1,000 small, draining tasks. Your body aches, and your mind is numb. You have handled priceless artifacts, engaged in intellectual puzzles, and fought a battle against decay, and the cumulative effect is one of profound exhaustion. Finally, Theon gives a single, sharp nod. You are dismissed. You file out of the small side door, the one you entered through what feels like a lifetime ago. As you step outside, the evening air of Alexandria greets you. The day's work is done. The library is safe for another night, thanks to your quiet, diligent, and utterly uncelebrated labors. Stepping out from the cool, still, papyrus-scented air of the library into the evening streets of Alexandria is a sensory shock, just as it was this morning, but in reverse. The day's oppressive heat has broken, leaving behind a warm, pleasant balm in the air. The sky above is no longer a pale, washed-out blue, but a deep, velvety indigo, pricked with the first stars. The city, however, is far from asleep. In many ways, it is just coming alive. The grand avenues of the Bruchian, the royal quarter, are quieter now than they were during the day. The official business of the Ptolemaic court has concluded. The chariots are gone, and the crowds of officials have thinned. But the streets are now dotted with the warm, flickering lights of oil lamps, placed in niches on the grand stone buildings or carried by servants, lighting the way for their wealthy masters. The atmosphere is less chaotic, more elegant. You see small groups of people, dressed in fine evening wear, heading to private dinner parties or symposia. Their laughter and conversation drift through the warm air, sounds from a world of leisure and social pleasure that is not your own. As you walk, your status once again shifts. In the library, you are a knowledgeable, if junior, functionary. Here, on the lamplit streets of the royal quarter, you are just a tired worker heading home, invisible to the wealthy residents. You keep to the sides of the wide avenues, your simple tunic and worn sandals marking you as someone who does not belong to the evening's festivities. Your journey takes you back across the invisible line that separates the Greek quarter from the Egyptian district of Rakotes. The transition is marked. The wide, paved avenues give way to the narrow, unpaved lanes. The soft glow of expensive olive oil lamps is replaced by the cheaper, smokier light of torches and tallow candles, which cast long, dancing shadows that make the familiar streets seem strange and menacing. The elegant quiet is replaced by a rising tide of noise. This is the time when the city's taverns and food stalls do their liveliest business. The air, which in the morning was thick with cooking fires and industry, is now filled with the smells of grilled fish, roasting meat, and frying dough. These are tantalizing smells, a world away from the simple, cold meal you know is waiting for you in your room. The sounds are a cacophony of life. Music from a stringed instrument drifting from a tavern door, the shouting of vendors selling evening snacks, the loud arguments of men who have already had too much to drink, the laughter of women gathered at a communal well. The physical exhaustion from your day at the library now settles deep into your bones. It is no longer just the ache in your back or the strain in your eyes from copying text. It is a profound, whole-body weariness. Your feet are sore from the long walk and from standing at your inspection tasks. Your mind, which has been focused and disciplined all day, is now dull and slow. You are no longer thinking about cataloging systems or the authenticity of texts. Your thoughts are simple, primal: food, water, rest. You have to be more careful walking these streets at night. The uneven ground is harder to see, and the shadows can hide anything from a pile of refuse to a sleeping dog or a thief. You clutch the small pouch of coins in your tunic a little tighter. While Rakotes is your home, you are aware that you are still, in many ways, an outsider, a Greek speaker in a largely Egyptian neighborhood. You keep your head down and walk with a steady, purposeful pace, avoiding eye contact. This is not a time for leisurely strolls. The human resilience on display is remarkable. These are people who work hard, physical jobs, dock workers, artisans, laborers. And yet they have the energy to gather, to socialize, to find joy and release at the end of a long day. You see a group of men playing a game of dice on an overturned crate, their faces illuminated by a single flickering torch, their roars of victory or groans of defeat echoing in the narrow street. You see families sitting on the steps of their tenements, talking and sharing a simple meal. Despite the poverty and the squalor, there is a powerful sense of community and life here that is absent from the cold, silent, scholarly halls of the library. You pass a food stall selling fried fish and chickpea cakes. The smell is almost painfully delicious. You have enough coins to buy a small piece of fish. It would be a luxury, a rare treat. You hesitate, your hand hovering over your pouch, but you resist the temptation. The coins you have must last you until you receive your next stipend. An impulsive purchase tonight could mean a day without bread next week. This is the constant, grinding calculus of poverty. Every small decision is weighed against the possibility of future hunger. It's a mental burden that is, in its own way, as exhausting as cataloging scrolls. Finally, you reach your own tenement building. You slip through the dark archway into the central courtyard. A few of your neighbors are still out, their quiet conversations a soft murmur in the darkness. You nod to them and make your way to the steep, familiar stairs. Each step is an effort. Your legs feel as heavy as lead. You climb up to the second floor landing, the wooden planks creaking under your weight. You reach your door, fumbling for a moment in the dark to find the simple wooden latch. You lift it, push the door open, and step inside. The day's journey is complete. You step across the threshold and close the door behind you, shutting out the lingering sounds and smells of the neighborhood. The darkness inside your small room is absolute, a stark contrast to the torchlit chaos of the street. For a moment, you just stand there, letting the silence and the familiar, stale air of your personal space envelop you. The oppressive heat of the day has baked itself into the mud brick walls, and the room radiates a gentle, stuffy warmth, like a recently used oven. Your first action is to create light. There is no switch to flip. You feel your way across the room to the small niche in the wall where your oil lamp sits. Your fingers find the clay saucer, the wick, and the small flint and steel you use for ignition. You strike the flint against the steel once, twice. A tiny spark leaps into the darkness. You carefully guide it to the oil-soaked tip of the linen wick. It catches, sputtering for a moment before settling into a small, steady, golden flame. The light pushes back the darkness, but only just. It casts a soft, warm glow on the immediate area, but the corners of the room remain shrouded in deep shadow. Your own shadow becomes a giant, flickering figure dancing on the wall behind you. This small, lonely flame is your companion for the evening. With the lamp lit, you can finally attend to your own needs. You go to the amphora in the corner and pour a generous amount of the tepid water into your basin. You strip off your dusty, sweat-stiffened tunic and wash yourself as best you can with a small cloth. The water feels incredibly refreshing on your skin, washing away the grime of the city and the fine, invisible dust of the library. It is a ritual of purification, a way of marking the boundary between the public world of work and the private world of rest. You are no longer a librarian, a scribe, or a pedestrian. You are just you in your own small space. After washing, you put on your other tunic, the one you will wear tomorrow. It is clean, or at least cleaner than the one you just took off. Then, you turn your attention to dinner. Your evening meal is as simple and solitary as your lunch. You take out the last of your hard barley bread and the final piece of your goat cheese. There are no olives left. You sit on your reed mat, the same mat you will sleep on, and eat your meal in the flickering lamplight. The silence of the room is profound. During the day at the library, the silence was one of concentration and unspoken competition. This silence is different. It is a silence of solitude. There is no one to talk to about your day, no one to share your small triumph with the patron or your frustration with the infested scrolls. Your thoughts are your only company. You think about the day. It unspools in your mind, not as a grand narrative, but as a series of sensory impressions. The gritty texture of the bread, The dry, dusty smell of old papyrus, the ache in your shoulders, the sharp scent of Apollodorus's perfume, the heart-sinking sight of the bookworms. These are the small, mundane realities that make up your existence. You came to Alexandria with grand dreams of intellectual discovery and philosophical debate. You imagined a life of the mind. You did not imagine that a life of the mind would be so intensely physical, so dependent on the resilience of your own body. You finish your meal, chewing the last hard crust of bread. The hunger in your stomach is sated, but a different kind of hunger remains. A hunger for connection, for meaning, for something more than this endless cycle of work and exhaustion. You look at the one luxury in your room, your personal scroll, the philosophical treatise you copied for yourself. You could unroll it, read a few columns, and feed your mind. But you are too tired. The thought of unrolling a scroll, of focusing your strained eyes on the script, feels like an extension of your work, not a release from it. The very thing you love, the world of books and knowledge, has become your labor. The joy of reading has been replaced by the fatigue of processing. This is perhaps the greatest irony of your job. Surrounded by more books than any person in history has ever had access to, you have no energy left to read them for pleasure. So instead, you just sit. You watch the flame of the lamp dance and sway, a tiny, living thing in the stillness of your room. The soft light is hypnotic. It is in these quiet moments that you feel the full weight of your life. You are a tiny, anonymous cog in a vast machine. Your work is essential, but you are replaceable. If you were to fall ill tomorrow, another young man with similar dreams would be sitting at your desk, sorting the same scrolls, fighting the same dust. Despite the hardships, you know you will get up and do it all again tomorrow. This isn't just a job. It is a calling, however buried it may be under layers of drudgery. You are part of the greatest intellectual project of your time. You are preserving the words of Homer, Plato, and Sappho. You are helping to build a repository of knowledge that will, you hope, enlighten generations to come. This belief, this flicker of purpose, is like your small oil lamp. It may not illuminate the whole room, but it is enough to keep the total darkness at bay. It is the reason you endure the gritty bread, the lonely evenings, the endless, boring routine. You are serving something larger than yourself. And for now, in this quiet, solitary room, that has to be enough. The oil in your lamp begins to burn low. The flame sputters, shrinking and flaring in a final, brief struggle before extinguishing itself, plunging the room back into complete darkness. The sudden absence of light is startling. Your eyes, accustomed to the soft glow, are now useless. You are left with only sound and touch. You can hear the distant, muted sounds of the city settling down for the night. A dog barking, the faint notes of music from a faraway tavern, the murmur of your neighbors' voices through the thin walls. These sounds are a reminder that you are a single, quiet cell in the vast, complex organism of the city. You lie down on your reed mat, pulling the coarse wool blanket over you. The packed earth floor is hard and unyielding against your back and hips, but your body is so deeply tired that the discomfort barely registers. The weariness is no longer a specific ache in your shoulders or a strain in your eyes. It is a heavy, leaden feeling that permeates every muscle and bone. It is the simple, profound exhaustion that comes from a day of relentless, meticulous labor. You close your eyes, but sleep does not come immediately. Your mind, which was so numb and dull just moments before, begins to replay fragments of the day. You see the swirling dust motes in the sunbeams of the library. You feel the brittle edge of a fragile scroll under your fingertips. You hear the sharp, commanding voice of the patron, Apollodorus. These are not grand epiphanies or deep philosophical ponderings. They are the residue of a day spent in service to the machinery of knowledge. You don't dream of debating philosophy with the great scholars. You don't have grand insights into the nature of the texts you copied. Your mind is too occupied with the practicalities of the work. You find yourself mentally rehearsing the classification of a difficult scroll, or worrying about the mildew you discovered, wondering if you should have reported it sooner. The job has seeped into your subconscious. The boring history for sleep has become the boring history of your dreams. The work of the day follows you into the night. You think about the immense, almost incomprehensible scale of the library. 500,000 scrolls. The number is so large it's an abstraction, but you have felt its physical reality. You have lifted the weight of it, breathed the dust of it, and felt the strain of it in your own body. The library is not an ethereal concept. It is a physical entity with its own metabolism, its own needs, its own vulnerabilities. It must be fed with new scrolls, cleaned of its own waste products of dust and decay, and protected from its enemies. And you are one of its keepers, a microbe in its gut, helping to digest the raw material of the world's knowledge. There is a certain peace in this thought. Your role is small, yes. You are anonymous, yes. But you are not insignificant. The great minds, the poets, the historians, the philosophers, are the architects of this great edifice of knowledge. But you and dozens of others like you are the stone masons. You are the ones who quarry the stone, who shape it, who hoist it into place. Without your slow, repetitive, unglamorous labor, their grand designs would remain nothing more than ideas. The foundation of this intellectual paradise is built on the bedrock of your boredom. You shift your position on the mat, trying to find a more comfortable spot. The scratchy wool of the blanket irritates your skin. The air in the room is still and close. You are a long way from the life you once imagined for yourself, a life of intellectual vibrancy and scholarly acclaim. But you are here, at the center of the world, participating in the most ambitious project of your age. This is the truth you hold on to. It is the anchor that keeps you from being swept away by the tide of drudgery. Where history whispers you to sleep, the whispers are of ink and papyrus, of order and decay, of small, quiet labors in the service of a monumental dream. Your breathing deepens. The fragmented thoughts of the day begin to dissolve, their sharp edges softening and blurring. The tension in your muscles finally begins to release its grip. The sounds from the city outside fade into a low, indistinct hum, a lullaby of urban life. You are not thinking about history or philosophy anymore. You are not thinking about anything. There is only the feeling of your own body, heavy and tired, sinking into the hard floor, surrendering to the profound, healing oblivion of sleep. You have survived another day. You have done your work, and now you can finally rest. The world of the Alexandrian librarian, with its silent pressures and monotonous tasks, feels both alien and strangely familiar. The tools have changed, from papyrus and ink to keyboards and screens, but the core of the work, the struggle to impose order on a chaotic flood of information, remains. Their fight against the physical decay of scrolls mirrors our own battle against data corruption and digital obsolescence. The quiet, uncelebrated labor of the cataloger, the archivist, and the data manager is still the bedrock upon which our own age of information is built. As you lie in your comfortable bed, a world away from a reed mat on a hard floor, perhaps you can appreciate the quiet legacy of these ancient workers. Their dedication ensured that at least some of the voices of their world were not silenced by time, not consumed by insects or erased by mold. The words that survived the long, perilous journey into our time did so because someone like you in our story spent their days in painstaking, often boring labor. They battled decay so that a thought, a story, or a poem might live just a little longer. So let the weariness of your own day dissolve. Let the mental clutter and the small anxieties fade away, like ink bleeding into damp papyrus. You are safe from the dust, the damp, and the endless, aching toil. Allow yourself to drift into a deep and peaceful rest, cradled by the quiet echo of their immense and tireless effort. Let the silence of the ancient library fill your room, a silence not of emptiness, but of profound and well-earned peace.